Here is your 3,000-word script ready to copy and paste. When was the last time you gave something truly from the heart at a moment when you yourself were in need? Be honest, because the answer to this question may reveal more about your relationship with prosperity than anything else you have ever studied. I know the title of this video sounds provocative. Giving when you have little? That's not wisdom, it's recklessness. That's what any sensible person would say. And that's exactly why this teaching has been hidden in plain sight for so long. Hidden within the texts of the Talmud, within the stories of the great masters, within the lives of people who seemed to defy all conventional economic logic and thrived exactly when they shouldn't have. Today we are going to delve deep into this paradox, not superficially, not with easy promises, not with that spiritual salesperson energy that promises guaranteed returns in 30 days, but with the seriousness and depth that this teaching deserves, because it is over 2,000 years old and has been tested in circumstances much more difficult than anything most of us have ever faced. Before continuing, tell me in the comments, have you ever felt an urge to give something in a moment of difficulty and held back? What went through your mind at that moment? Write it down, because that urge you felt and perhaps ignored has a name in the Jewish tradition. And today you will understand where it comes from. And if you are not yet part of this community, subscribe now and activate the bell, because this type of teaching does not appear everywhere, and when it does, it is worth keeping. Let me start with a story, a parable that has circulated for generations in Jewish study circles. One of those stories that survive because they carry more truth than any rational argument could carry alone. They say there was a widow who lived with her 2 sons in a small town during a time of great scarcity. They had little, very little. Enough for one day at a time, sometimes even less than that. One morning, an elder knocked on the door asking for food. The children looked at their mother, expecting her to explain that there was nothing left. Instead, she went to the pantry, took half of what they had, half, not the leftovers, and gave it to the elder with a calm smile. The children remained silent until the elder left. Then the oldest asked, "Mom, how could you do that? We barely have enough for today." She looked at him and replied, "Exactly for that reason. When you have little and give anyway, you are declaring to heaven that you trust you will receive more. When you have little and hold on to everything, you are declaring that what you have is all that will exist. And heaven tends to confirm what you declare." This story stayed. It stayed because it does not describe naivety. It describes a precise spiritual logic, a logic that the Talmud articulates with much more sophistication than any parable can capture, but that the parable makes accessible in a way that intellectual argument cannot. The central teaching I want to present to you today comes from a famous passage in the Talmud, in the tractate of Ta'anit. The sages were discussing the nature of prosperity, where it comes from, what attracts it, what blocks it, and at a certain moment, one of the great masters made a statement that sparked debate for centuries. He said that there is a principle called marbe tzedakah, marbe shalom. Marbe tzedakah, marbe shalom. Whoever multiplies tzedakah, tzedakah, multiplies shalom, shalom. And here it is important to understand what these two words really mean. Tzedakah is not charity in the sense of optional generosity. The root of the word is tzedek, tzedek, justice. Tzedakah is the act of returning to the flow what belongs to the flow. In the Kabbalistic view, the resources that come to you are not entirely yours. A part of them belongs to the greater system, to the flow of abundance that sustains everyone. When you practice tzedakah, you are not being generous with what is yours. You are being correct with what has always belonged to everyone. And shalom, shalom, is not simply peace in the sense of absence of conflict. Shalom comes from the root shalem, shalem, wholeness, completeness. Shalom is the state of one who is not fragmented, who is not at war with oneself, who inhabits their own life in an integrated way. It is exactly this state, this wholeness, that creates the conditions for real prosperity to settle in. So what the Talmud is saying, translated into straightforward language, is whoever keeps the flow of giving active, especially when it is difficult, especially when the impulse is to withhold, creates within themselves the conditions for a wholeness that is the most fertile ground for genuine prosperity to grow. But there is an aspect of this teaching that goes even deeper. And it is here that Kabbalah enters with a dimension that the Talmud hints at but does not fully articulate. There is a concept called Ein Hara, the eye of evil, often associated with envy and the negative energy it generates. But in the deeper Kabbalistic reading, Ein Hara has an internal dimension that is less discussed, the envy that a person has of themselves. The internal voice that looks at what they have and says, "It is not enough. It is not safe. I need to hold on. I need to protect." This voice, this internal distrust regarding one's own abundance, is what Kabbalists identified as the most common and hardest blockage to undo. Because it is always disguised as prudence, it always presents itself as responsibility. It always has a very convincing, rational argument. And the practice of giving, when you have little, is, among other things, a direct antidote against this voice. Because when you open your hand at the moment when everything in you wants to close, you are doing something that goes far beyond the act of giving. You are breaking the internal pattern of distrust. You are demonstrating to yourself, in the most concrete language possible, that you do not believe that what you have now is all that will exist. This act of breaking the pattern is what Kabbalah calls berur, clarification, purification. You are purifying a limiting belief through a concrete physical act, not through mental affirmation, not through visualization, through action. And action, in the Kabbalistic view, has a transformative power that no purely mental process can match. The Zohar, the central text of Jewish mysticism, has a beautiful image for this principle. It describes the spiritual structure of prosperity as a current of light flowing from the higher Sephirot towards the material world. And it says that this current needs conductors, people who function as wires through which the light can pass. A wire that conducts electricity does not hold the current within itself, it lets it pass. And precisely because it lets it pass, it fulfills its function and remains part of the circuit. A wire that tries to retain the current burns out. It collapses. It is removed from the circuit. The person who practices tzedakah consistently, especially in times when it is difficult, is maintaining themselves as a conductor. They are telling the spiritual circuit, "I am a reliable channel. The light can safely pass through me." And because the circuit knows that you are a reliable channel, it continues to flow through you. This is what the Kabbalists called Hanhagat Ha'or, the conduction of light. Not the possession of light, the conduction. And there is an abyssal difference between the two. Now let's talk about practice, because everything we have discussed so far is teaching. And teaching without practice is like a seed without soil. The first practice is what I call tzedakah de katnut, the tzedakah of the transformed small mind. It is specifically designed for moments of difficulty, of tightness, when the month is harder than expected. At that moment, exactly at that moment, you set something aside. It doesn't have to be much. It needs to be intentional. It can be the equivalent of a coffee. It can be an hour of your time given to someone in need. It can be an item from your pantry taken to a family that is going through hardship. And as you do this, you say, internally or softly, the following words. I do not give this because I have plenty. I give this because I trust that more is coming. This act is my declaration of bitachon, of active trust in the source that does not deplete. The power of this practice is not in the value of what you gave. It is in the moment you gave, and in the consciousness with which you give. A real gift given with full awareness in a moment of need creates more birur, more internal clarification than 100 reais given automatically in a moment of abundance. The second practice comes from a specific teaching of Rabbi Akiva, one of the greatest sages of the Talmud, who said that the way of giving matters as much as the act of giving. Rabbi Akiva taught that tzedakah given with anava, with genuine humility, without ostentation, without the need for recognition, has an exponentially greater spiritual power than tzedakah given in public to be seen. The practice I propose to you is called matana beseter, the gift in secret. Once a week, for 40 days, the number of transformation, you give something to someone completely anonymously. The person cannot know it was you. You cannot tell anyone. You cannot post on social media. You cannot even comment in private conversation. There is only the act, you and the eternal. And this privacy, this silence around the act, is what preserves the purity of intention. It ensures that you are giving because the principle is true, not because you want to be seen as generous. The Kabbalists said that secret tzedakah opens portals that public tzedakah cannot open, not because God prefers secrets, but because the secret is the test of the purity of intention. And pure intention is the rarest and most powerful ingredient in any spiritual practice. The third practice is the most structural of all and comes directly from the principle of Maser that we mentioned in previous videos, but with a specific application for moments of financial difficulty. It is called Maser Rishon Biyom HaKasheh, the first tithe on the difficult day. The practice is this: when a resource arrives, any resource, you set aside 10% before making any other allocation, before paying a bill, before buying food, before anything. I know this may sound impossible depending on your situation, and tradition recognizes this. There is a whole rabbinic discussion about when and how the Maser can be adapted in situations of extreme need. But the principle is clear. Order matters. What comes first declares what you believe. And when the tithe comes first, you are declaring, with the most concrete act possible, that you operate from abundance, not scarcity, that you trust the source, that you are a channel, not a reservoir. If 10% seems too much in your current moment, start with 1% of what comes in, set aside first, before anything else. Cultivating the habit of order is more important than getting the percentage right immediately. There is a real tension in this teaching that I need to name honestly, because any teaching that does not recognize its own internal tension is not being completely honest. The tension is this: Kabbalah does not teach irresponsibility. It does not teach that you should put yourself in a situation of real risk for a spiritual practice. Jewish tradition has a fundamental principle called pikuach nefesh, the preservation of life, which prevails over almost all other principles. If giving will put you or your family in real, immediate, concrete danger, this is not the time to give what you do not have. What tradition teaches is different from that. It teaches to give at the edge of discomfort, not at the edge of the impossible. There is a difference between the discomfort of opening your hand when the impulse is to close it and the real harm of depriving the family of the essentials. The teaching of giving when you have little lives in this tension, in the space between comfort and the impossible. It is there that spiritual growth happens. It is there that birur, the clarification, occurs. It is there that consciousness finds its own boundary and chooses to expand it. And it is there also that heaven, according to the wise, pays the most attention. Tell me in the comments, are you going to try any of these 3 practices? Which one makes the most sense for where you are right now? L'tzedakah katnut, the gift in the hidden, or the Meiser Rishon? Write it down, because your answer helps me understand where our community is and what needs to be deepened. And if this teaching reached you at a time when you are seeking a new perspective on the relationship between faith and prosperity, share it with someone you love who is going through a difficult time. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give is an idea that changes how a person sees their own situation. A blessing for you who stayed until here and who perhaps throughout this video has already felt the urge to open your hand a little more. May your generosity never impoverish you. May each act of giving with awareness expand the channel through which blessings flow to you. May trust be stronger in you than fear. May your open hands be the clearest sign that you know where everything comes from and that this source never runs dry. May the Eternal see what you do in silence and respond in the visible. May what you plant in faith grow beyond what you can imagine. The Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May His light illuminate every decision you make. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you and give you peace. May peace, the wholeness that nothing can break, rest upon you and all that you build. Amen and Amen. In the next video, we will delve into one of the most surprising teachings of Kabbalah about time. Specifically about why the sages said there is a moment in the day when any request made with consciousness has a completely different spiritual weight, a teaching that will change the way you use your hours. Activate the bell and I'll see you there. Shalom.